You're listening to the planet's memory, where time breathes and the Earth remembers. What if time was not the beginning, but the memory of something older? What if before history, before thought, before even light, there was only the hush of waiting stone? The Earth turns, slow and unhurried, beneath us now. But long ago, before calendars, before the counting of years, before the naming of stars, it turned just the same, unknown, and yet alive. Beneath our cities, beneath the roots of forests, beneath the deepest rivers carved by vanished glaciers, there are layers of dust so old they no longer carry names. Grains once lifted by storms now pressed tight into the beds of stone, quieted by weight, by time, by forgetting. This is not dust as we know it, not ash or soil or sand, but a kind of ancient breath, the exhalation of mountains crumbling, of meteorites breaking open like seeds, of the planet's own skin shedding stories it no longer needs. And all of it settles, slowly, softly, into silence. From these layers, we have tried to learn, pale souls, ancient soils, tell of atmospheres we'll never breathe. Banded iron formations shine faintly with the memory of oxygen's first whisper. Even tiny zircon crystals, locked in volcanic birth, pulse with isotopic clocks that stretch 4 billion years across our fingers. They tell us there was something before time, before life, before memory, something old enough to dream in minerals. It is not easy to understand this kind of time, deep time, geological time. It doesn't tick, it doesn't pass, it surrounds in such time. Mountains are not permanent, continents wander like clouds, oceans bloom and vanish, species rise, flicker, and fall silent, and yet the dust remains. It always does. Imagine holding a grain of it between your fingertips, so light, so soft, and yet it has outlived empires. It has seen the rise and fall of oceans, the folding of land, the breathing of forests, long extinct. It carries no memory of us, but we are built from it all the same. Our bones, our blood, our breath, they are made from what fell before we came, what eroded before we spoke, what cooled before we could see. Even now, when we walk the surface of the earth, we are not really walking on the present. We are walking on the past, compressed, disguised, and dreaming. Every step presses into dust that once circled suns that no longer shine, and in some places that dust thickens. It hardens, it becomes sedimentary stone, a diary written without words, each layer a breath, a pause, a shift, a quiet yes. Geologists read these pages with tools and patience. They measure isotope ratios, analyze trace elements, and reconstruct vanished worlds from the leanest hints. But the Earth is in no hurry to give up its secrets. There are always gaps, voids, entire chapters missing, perhaps eroded, perhaps never written. This is what makes the Earth's memory feel so much like a dream, fragmented, atmospheric, emotional more than linear. And so we imagine what it was like when the planet was young, cloaked in haze, oceans still boiling with possibility. We imagine a sky without blue, a world without shape, a silence so thick even light seemed lost in it. And in that imagining something stirs, not in the rocks, but in us, because we are not separate from the dust. We are its continuation, its echo, its experiment. We are the breath the planet took when it wanted to remember. We are not just made of earth. We are earth, remembering itself. And yet, if this much can be forgotten, what else might still be dreaming beneath us? From that wondering silence, we descend, not downward, but backward through the crust of time itself. Below the dust, below the fossil-stamped stones, there are deeper layers of story. Their pages are not written in fossils or ash, but in pressure, in fault lines, in the way the planet's skin has torn, healed, and torn again. Once, long before our continents knew their names, the Earth was shaped by collisions so slow they moved in inches per century, and yet with a force that would tear worlds open. Land masses the size of moons drifted toward one another across molten seas, not fast, not loud, but inevitable, and when they met, they folded, they fused, they cracked. What remains are the bones, the hidden roots of vanished continents, pieces of Gondwana, fragments of Rodinia, scars where Laurentia once brushed against Baltica, where India once pressed into the edge of Antarctica, where Australia slept beside Africa before any of them were born into shape. These are not just poetic ghosts, their fingerprints live in isotopes, subtle variations in lead, neodymium, hafnium, that betray their origin stories. They whisper through zircon grains, born in the heat of mountain-building events long forgotten by the surface world. We can trace them, barely, like tracing the breath of a person long dead by the fog they once left on glass. Rodinia, they say, was born over 1 billion years ago, a vast fused continent, older than animal life. It drifted in slow cycles, existing longer than all of recorded human history by 100-fold, and then it fractured. The pieces drifted, separated by time and ocean, until they reassembled again, this time as Gondwana, and later as Pangaea, each one a repetition, a chorus, a heartbeat too long to hear. But they are not whole now. They never will be again. Erosion has chewed their faces, subduction has recycled their edges, volcanoes have rewritten their names. What survives is buried in metamorphic belts, in the curved ridges of ancient mountains, in the crust that underpins continents like forgotten roots. Even our present landscapes carry their memory. The Appalachians, born when Africa kissed North America. The Scottish Highlands, once the spine of a mountain range that crossed an ocean no longer there. The rocks of Central Australia, witnesses to pressures deeper than any ocean trench today. We call them cratons, these ancient stable cores, but they are not still. They move, minutely, they hum with the slow music of plate tectonics. And what of the continents that left no name behind? The lost land of Greater Eritrea, once attached to the edge of Africa, now shattered beneath southern Europe. Zealandia, a continent almost entirely submerged, hiding beneath the waves near New Zealand. Kumari Kandam, Lemuria, Hyperborea, stories born not from science but from longing, still echoing in folklore, waiting for rediscovery or forgetting. Maybe some continents existed only in the dreaming of the earth itself. Maybe not everything leaves a fossil. Still, the bones remain, not as skeletons, but as densities in the crust, as heat signatures in seismic waves, as oddities in mineral alignment, like memories misfiled in stone. To walk across a continent is to walk across a mosaic of past worlds. Each region, each ridge, a different chapter. Some born in fire, some in ice, some in silence. And above them, us, building cities, drawing borders, never knowing what sleeps beneath. And yet, if the continents themselves can forget their shape, how much of our own story is still missing beneath our feet? From the bones of shattered land, we drift outward to where the edges of the world dissolve into sea. But this was no sea as we know it. There were no names, no coastlines, no familiar depths. There were only great planetary basins, cradling water thick with heat, chemicals and possibility. It was a different kind of silence then, deeper, not because of depth, but because there were no ears to hear, no tide pools, no sand, just a darkness that stretched across the planet like a waiting breath. The oceans were restless, born from volcanic steam and cometary ice. They churned in chaotic balance, cycling heat and minerals through vents that pierced the ocean floor like ancient mouths. From these black smokers, tall hissing towers of mineral breath, came not just metal-rich plumes, but something more remarkable, a seedbed for life. In those early oceans, hydrogen sulfide replaced sunlight and energy came not from stars, but from the Earth's own interior. Microbial colonies grew in the unlikeliest warmth, blind, soft, and enduring. They were not cells as we know them. They were scaffolds, blueprints, the earliest forms of chemistry dreaming itself into biology, and the water held them. It held heat, salt, iron. It held time dissolved across 1 billion ripples. It held memory, not in stories but in salinity, in pH, in isotopic balance. Even now, seawater holds the fingerprints of those early days, ratios of oxygen-18, carbonate traces, boron, a memory of acidity, of warmth, of oxygen slowly blooming into the tides. We forget sometimes that oceans are not timeless. They evolve, they breathe, they vanish, and return. Before the Pacific, there was Panthalassa. Before the Atlantic, there was Iapetus. Each ocean rose, spread, and was swallowed again by moving plates, their waters migrating, reshaping, their identities erased. But the chemistry remains. The same sodium, the same chlorine, elements that pass through the gills of trilobites, the tissues of ammonites, the bones of ichthyosaurs, now dissolve into our own bloodstreams. The sea never truly leaves. In some places it still whispers of its earliest hours. In the shadows of the Mariana Trench, 7 miles deep, pressure flattens sound into a hush that feels older than thought. In the shallows of the mid-Atlantic ridge, newborn crust forms from volcanic seam lines, releasing minerals that mirror those ancient plumes. Even in the polar ice, salt crystals form stories of shifting currents, of melt and freeze cycles that echo the long planetary breath. We imagine the ocean as a surface, blue, reflective, changeable, but it is also a memory organ. It stores heat, absorbs carbon, reshapes wind, births weather. Its tides are pulled by the moon, a gravitational lullaby repeating for billions of years. Its currents, slow, massive rivers within it, carry not just temperature, but the echoes of ancient salinity patterns laid down by climates long gone. And when we dive deep enough, when the light fades completely, we enter a realm untouched by time, a place where ancient water still circulates from glacial periods, 1,000 years old, cold, nutrient-rich, and nearly forgotten. There, life clings to rock, tiny shrimp with no eyes, worms with no mouths, creatures who know nothing of sunlight, yet persist, as if remembering an ancient contract with the dark. Maybe this is what the ocean has always done: hold things quietly, let them rest, until the planet is ready to remember them. And us? We live by its edge. We swim in its shallows. We chart its surface. But its oldest dreams lie far beneath, where pressure writes poems in silence. And yet, if the sea can cradle this much memory in darkness, what else might still be sleeping, lightless, beneath its waves, from the ocean's breathless hush? We lift our eyes upward, not towards stars, but toward a sky that has long since forgotten how to blush red. There was a time before blue, before the atmosphere opened into color, before air became a mirror for light. It was not the sky we know now, with its cerulean clarity and painted sunsets. It was thicker, dimmer, wrapped in a veil of methane, carbon dioxide, and volcanic vapor. A sky not meant to be seen by eyes, because eyes had not yet been invented. Still, the light came, low, slanted, distant. It filtered through the haze and painted everything in tones of rust and rose, not because the world was warm, but because it was heavy with things yet to become breath. This was the Archean world, 3 billion years ago, a planet still shaping itself, and a sky in the middle of forgetting how it began. Volcanoes dotted the surface like open mouths, coughing iron and ash into the air, each eruption a punctuation mark in Earth's long molten sentence. They poured lava across the young crust, released sulfur into the wind, and filled the sky with fine particles, aerosols that scattered sunlight into copper hues. And still, the planet turned. Beneath that sky, the ocean stirred. Iron drifted freely in the water, dark and abundant, giving the seas a greenish-black sheen. But deep within those waters, tiny architects were at work, cyanobacteria, simple, silent, efficient. They did something no life had done before. They began to exhale oxygen, not for breath, not for change, but as a quiet byproduct, a residue of sunlight absorbed, of carbon transformed, and slowly, impossibly, the air began to change. Oxygen entered the atmosphere like a secret. At first it met iron in the oceans and rusted it into submission. Banded iron formations settled on the seafloor, red and grey layers stacked like forgotten hymns, each band a breath, a pause, a shift. The ocean changed colour, the sky remained dim, but the chemistry of the world had turned a corner, even if no one had yet lived to see it. For millions of years, oxygen had no home in the air. It rusted the seas, it oxidized minerals, it was consumed by the crust, and then it accumulated. The Great Oxidation Event, as we now call it, was not sudden. It was slow, rhythmic, reluctant, but its effects were permanent. The red haze began to thin, the methane faded, the carbon dioxide was drawn into stone, and the sky began to pale. Blue did not arrive with fanfare. It crept in, soft, silent, almost shy, because blue is not something the air makes, it is what the air allows. When sunlight enters a stable atmosphere, one made of oxygen and nitrogen, shorter wavelengths scatter in all directions. This is Rayleigh scattering. This is why the sky appears blue. But the blue is not real. It's a ghost of direction, a pattern of bouncing light. And before the earth had breathed, it had no ghost to give. Now when we look up, we see a sky that was once impossible, a colour that had to be invented, a world that had to be oxidized into memory. We take it for granted. This light, this hue, this breath, but everything we see now is the result of ancient, unseen labour. It was the work of microbes, of magma, of time, of planetary patience, and still the earth turned. Even now, the sky carries whispers of its past. After volcanic eruptions, the air sometimes reddens again, not in rage but in remembrance. Dust, sulphur, and ash mimic the ancient haze. Sunsets deepen, moons grow blood-coloured, and for a moment we see backwards. We see a sky without us, a sky that was never meant for lungs, never meant for eyes, but still it dreamed of breath, and so it made room. It oxidized, it lightened, it shimmered into something only future creatures would learn to love. And yet, if the sky had to be remade just to carry light, what other colours might still be waiting in the atmosphere of time? From that palening sky we return to earth, not to calm soils or slow oceans, but to where the planet cracked open and fire wrote its memory into stone. There are places where the past was not buried in sediment, but seared into being, where life did not decay into dust, but was stilled in an instant, caught in the breath of eruption, captured in the blink of catastrophe. Fossils, we often think, are made of bone, of shells, of the slow pressure of eons turning structure into stone. But some fossils were born in fire, in the shadow of volcanoes, from Vesuvius to Yellowstone, from ancient flood baths to the soft scars of island arcs. There are ghosts pressed into glass. They are not skeletons. They are silhouettes, leaves, insects, seeds, even the fragile curves of single-celled spirals, all caught mid-movement, mid-thought, mid-breath, trapped beneath blankets of ash and heat. The ash fell like snowfall, soft and endless, but deadly in its weight. It smothered forests, it erased landscapes, and as it cooled, it hardened, preserving what it touched, not in detail but in gesture. These are the carbon films, the fire fossils, the carbon-based life forms reduced to their most elemental form, pressed so thin they become shadows, pressed so long they become time. Some formed within pumice, the frothy skin of explosive lava. Others were sealed inside obsidian, volcanic glass. smooth as silence, sharp as memory. In rare moments, even the soft tissue of animals, feathers, eyes, muscles, were outlined in fire's embrace. These fossils speak differently. They don't tell stories of long evolution or deep burial. They tell of interruption, of ending, of instant stillness, and yet, in their stillness, they preserve something more emotional than bones ever could. They show life as it was, a fern unfurling, a beetle mid-flight, a mushroom bending beneath its own brief weight. Moments, not monuments. The scientific language we use for this is taphonomy, the study of what happens to organisms after death. But here the death was not slow, it was sudden, and in that violence, something was saved. Pompeii is the famous example, a Roman city frozen in pyroclastic fury. But older still are the petrified forests of Washington state, the ash-locked flora of Argentina, the Miocene insects trapped in the fine volcanic shales of China. Even older are the Precambrian microbial mats preserved in ancient pillow lavas, bubbles of molten rock that cooled in seawater, trapping archaea in their final curl. To hold such a fossil is to hold a contradiction. It is delicate, but ancient. It is fleeting, but eternal. It is absence made visible. And maybe that is what fire fossils truly are. Not remains, but absences shaped by memory. Absences that the earth refused to let go. Sometimes, even now, volcanoes offer up fossils in their cooled flows. A tree trunk encased in basalt, a frog's imprint in rhyolite, a flower's carbon ghost, so fine it breaks beneath breath. And we learn to read them not just as scientists, but as dreamers, because these are the dreams of a planet that burns and still chooses to remember what it once held. The ash, after all, is not just death, it is preservation, it is memory suspended in heat, and what survived was not the strongest, not the largest, but the ones who happened to be in the right place at the wrong time. Perhaps memory is always partial, perhaps it always favors the edge cases, the fragile, the incidental, the ones caught by accident in time's closing hand. And yet, if even fire can remember the outline of a leaf, what softer stories might still be etched into the molten heart of earth? From the charred imprint of a vanished wing, we drift again, this time into cold, not the cold of a winter, not a season, but the slow, vast cold of a planet, slipping into quiet. The earth has frozen and thawed many times, and between each ice age, something unimaginable happened. Life continued. Glaciers spread like slow thoughts, moving across continents with quiet determination. They carved valleys, crushed forests, dragged entire mountains into new shapes. But between them, between those long white silences, there were warmer breaths, interglacials. We call them brief, by geological standards. 10,000 years of sunlight, 15,000 years of green, and then the freeze returns. It is a rhythm, a lullaby, driven by the tilt of Earth's axis, by its orbit, by the long waltz of planetary mechanics that seem too subtle to shape worlds. But do Milankovitch cycles. They're called a dance of shadows and distance. And with each slow spiral, the glaciers breathe in and out, in, covering much of the northern hemisphere in ice 2 miles thick, out, retreating, melting, revealing lakes, rivers, soil, in again, and all the while, life adapts, or disappears. Mastodons walked where Chicago now stands, saber-toothed cats watched from shadowed ridgelines, tiny mammoths trudged across islands now drowned, and between these colder centuries, in the warmth between pulses, new species arrived, new seeds sprouted, new songs were heard, and then forgotten again. It's in these thawed silences that humanity found its breath. We emerged not in the ice, but in its absence. We learned to walk upright under skies that had only just begun to brighten. We made fire from fallen limbs in forests that had recently been under glaciers. We carved symbols on stone not far from where the ice had stopped, as if to say, we were here during the warmth. Remember us when the cold returns. But the earth forgets easily. Ice sheets do not record voices. Glaciers grind everything into memoryless flour. And so we study what the cold left behind. The pollen pressed into lake beds, the oxygen trapped in ice cores, the shifting ratios of carbon and methane, whispering of climates past. We speak of glacial maximums, of stadials and interstadials. But behind the language is something quieter, a question. Does the planet rest between these ice ages? Does it dream under the snow? Some scientists think of the Earth as a system, a balance of energy, of carbon, of light. But what if it is also a kind of mind, one that forgets and then remembers, one that freezes and then breathes, one that keeps its deepest stories under layers of ice, waiting for the melt? We know this. Every ice age has ended. Every glacier has retreated. Every silence has been followed by warmth. And in that warmth, something new has always grown. So when we look to the future, at melting ice caps, at warming oceans, at ancient patterns unraveling, we wonder, is this just the end of another rhythm, or the beginning of one we do not yet understand? Perhaps the ice remembers more than we do. Perhaps it sleeps but never forgets. And yet, if whole epochs can be erased by silence, what else might return when the glaciers exhale again? From the thawed breath of ice, we go deeper now, past the forests, past the granite ridges, past even the shifting plates that carry continents across time. We fall beneath them, into the oldest stillness the planet has ever known. There, buried in the heart of every landmass, lie the cretons. They are the cradles of the continents, ancient, unshaken cores of stone, unbothered by surface dramas, the foundations of the world as we know it. The roots, and they do not move. For billions of years, as oceans rose and fell, as glaciers came and went, as new life bloomed and vanished above, the cretons held. They are made of rocks, older than rain, older than rivers, older than any atmosphere that could carry breath. Some are nearly as old as the planet itself, 3.5, even 4 billion years, fragments of a time when Earth was still hot, raw, molten at the edges, when bombardment by meteorites was still common, and the moon hung closer in the sky, newly born from collision. We do not often think about what lies beneath us, not deeply enough. But beneath Canada, beneath parts of Australia, Africa, Greenland, and Siberia, the cretons rest like sleeping giants, immovable, dense, cold. They are made of high-grade metamorphic rocks, gneiss, eclogite, peridotite, minerals born under immense pressure and never return to the light. And unlike younger rocks, they have not been recycled. They escaped the churn of subduction, the dance of plate tectonics. Instead, they stayed still, like memory that refused to fade. Within them, ancient zircons are found, the oldest minerals on Earth, tiny, resilient crystals that carry within them isotopic ratios that reveal the earliest days of planetary cooling, the presence of water, even the hints of protocontinents forming like first thoughts in a newborn mind. These zircons are older than bones, older than air, and yet they still glow, faintly, under the right light, time trapped in lattice work. We call these places shields, the exposed parts of the cretons that rise to the surface, worn bare by erosion. They form the hearts of continents, the Canadian Shield, the Kartful Kraton, the Yilgarn Block. But much of the cratonic world remains buried, unreachable, too deep for drills, too quiet for earthquakes to fully reveal. Still, seismologists listen. They send waves into the ground and study their echoes, tracing the outlines of roots that go hundreds of kilometers into the mantle. They call this the keel, like the base of a ship, and Earth is floating on it. These roots are what allow continents to survive. Without them, The land would have been subducted long ago, melted, rewritten. The Kratons are not just old, they are protective. They are the reason you can stand on solid ground, but they are not lifeless. Within some Kratonic rocks, researchers have found ancient water trapped in cracks, untouched for over 1 billion years. So old it no longer resembles modern water in chemistry, a quiet ocean, sealed in stone. In others, deep mines have uncovered microbial life, surviving without sunlight, feeding on the decay of radioactive elements, life in rock, miles below the surface, living in the dark, because the earth remembers how to keep secret. And so the Kratons hum, with time, with pressure, with stories unspoken. They are lullabies, not because they are soft, but because they are steady, the pulse beneath tectonic noise, the heartbeat of a planet old enough to forget itself, and still endure. And maybe we came from these roots too. Maybe the iron in our blood was refined in their stillness. Maybe the silence beneath us is not emptiness, but invitation to listen, to wonder, to remember. Because beneath the shifting world above, beneath the seasons and the cities and the scars, there is always something holding still. And yet, if the oldest rocks can still carry water and whispers, what else might be singing from the center of the earth? From the deep, unmoving roots of the Kratons we rise again, gently, to the places where sky and stone first touched, to the ancient shores where the earth took its first breath of cloud, and the sky learned how to fall. There was a time before rain, a time when the sky held its water close, thick with steam and gases, cloaked in haze. Back then, the heat of the planet kept moisture aloft, suspended in a restless veil. The oceans boiled at their edges. The continents had only just begun to rise from the sea, newborn and unsure, and still, the clouds gathered. And then, it began, not as a storm, not as thunder, but as a gentle release, the first raindrops falling onto a world that had never heard them before. They struck volcanic ash, soft mud, cooling basalt, tiny impacts, quiet rhythms, imprints pressed into stone like the first fingerprints of weather. Some of those marks are still here, preserved in 2.7-billion-year-old rock beds, found in places like South Africa and Australia. Ancient surfaces, hardened by time, yet still pockmarked by a fleeting sky. We call them fossil raindrops, each one a soft crater, no more than a few millimeters across. Yet from their shape, their depth, their pattern, we learn about air pressure, about gravity, about the infancy of atmosphere. Scientists study the splatter radius, the indent curve, the sediment strength. They reverse engineer the moment, that precise instant, when sky became rain, and rain became memory. Imagine that, to hold a slab of stone and within it, see a raindrop that fell before oxygen filled the air, before moss, before leaves, before anything with lungs had taken form. These were not storms as we know them. There was no thunderhead, no lightning bolt, just a sky, heavy with waiting. Finally learning how to weep, and in that weeping change, rain began to shape the land. It wore down the high places, it carved channels in young stone, it carried minerals into rivers, into oceans, into the chemical soup from which life would rise. The hydrologic cycle, now so familiar, was born. Evaporation, condensation, precipitation, repetition, a rhythm older than forests, older than bone, and with every cycle, the world softened. Ash became clay, stone became soil, barren plains became places of potential. Rain transformed silence into fertility. Even now, when we walk along rocky shores or dry streambeds, we can sometimes hear it, not with our ears, but in the shape of things, the way stones are rounded, the way sand gathers in curves, the way moss clings to shadowed crevices. Rain leaves no voice, but always a trace, and perhaps it has always been music, not in melody, but in mood, a soft percussion on leaf and roof, on water and earth, a lullaby not sung, but felt. Could the first rain have sounded different, heavier, perhaps, falling through a denser sky, striking a warmer earth? Or maybe it was no different at all. Maybe what we hear on quiet nights, when the world fades into darkness and rain begins to whisper, is the very same song that touched those primordial shores, a rhythm unchanged, a memory replayed, and still the earth turns beneath it, soaked, softened, shaped. The first rain may have ended without witness, but its echo is in everything that followed, in the way rivers wander, in the way seeds swell, in the way we stop even now to listen when water meets earth. Because deep down, we remember, not with thought, but with rhythm, with the hush we feel when the rain begins. And yet, if the sky once taught the earth to dream in drops, what other stories might still be waiting to fall? From that first rain, soft as breath, we drift downward again, not into deep stone, but into warmth and water, into the quiet kingdoms built by time itself. There, beneath the tide, coral grows, not fast, not loud, but steadily, the slow, patient pulse of calcium carbonate and living tissue, building spires and domes from nothing but light, salt and memory. Coral reefs are cathedrals of entropy, built from the skeletal remains of those that came before, generation upon generation, each leaving behind its brittle scaffolding, so that life might continue, rearranged. They are not singular creatures, but colonies, polyps, tiny and soft, joining together to form something vast, intricate and breathtaking. And within their fragile frames, whole worlds are born. Fish weave through labyrinths of branches, crustaceans vanish into crevices, algae pulse with sunlight, feeding their coral hosts through photosynthetic whispers. And yet, these vibrant cities are also records of temperature, of acidity, of silence. Each layer of coral skeleton carries isotopic signatures, subtle variations in oxygen and carbon, that tell the story of the water that surrounded it. A warm year leaves a different mark than a cold one. High carbon dioxide leaves a thinner wall, a weaker frame. Storms score their surface. Bleaching leaves them pale. To study a coral core is to read a timeline of the sea's emotional state. Geologists and oceanographers extract these cores like scrolls, long cylinders of fossil growth, reaching back decades, centuries, even millennia. Inside they find the fingerprints of volcanoes, of El Niño oscillations, of human intervention. Corals remember, not with thought, but with form. They archive chemistry in calcium, but entropy touches them too. As oceans warm, coral struggles to hold its shape. As acidity rises, their skeletons dissolve faster than they can build. The symbiotic algae, so vital for color, for energy, begin to abandon their hosts under heat stress. The reefs turn ghostly, still standing, but hollowed. This is not sudden death. This is slow forgetting. Entropy does not erase with violence. It rearranges. It takes order and loosens it. It takes clarity and turns it to blur. Even the most vibrant reef is always quietly in retreat, and yet it continues. Fragments break off and float, settle, attach to new rock, begin again. There are corals that survived the asteroid that ended the age of dinosaurs. Corals that have watched the ice ages come and go. Corals that remember when human hands had not yet shaped the coastlines. What do they know of resilience? Not survival in the loud sense, but the quiet persistence of form, the ability to be broken and rebuilt, rearranged, but never fully gone. Entropy, too, wears a crown. Not a crown of gold, but of coral, branching, living, eroding, growing. A crown that forgets its past while building its future on the bones of its memory. And isn't that what life does? It forgets, it adapts, it rearranges itself in new patterns, forgetting the old not with cruelty, but with necessity. We too are built from such forgetting. Our cells replace themselves, our minds evolve, our stories shift. We live in a continuity of change, a reef of selves, layered, adapted, wearing our own fragile crowns. And the oceans remind us, what seems permanent is always in motion. What seems whole is always composed of smaller parts, endlessly replaced. Coral knows this. It does not resist entropy, it weaves with it. It accepts erosion, it transforms collapse into blueprint. And in doing so, it lasts. So when we swim over a reef, bright or bleached, we are moving over layers of memory, over time rearranged into color, into architecture, into living drift. We are looking at entropy, dreaming, and yet, if even forgetting can create beauty, what else might we be building without even knowing? From the fragile crowns of coral, we descend once more into darker layers, into motion not of tides, but of the earth itself. Beneath the ocean's calm surface lies a conveyor belt of time, slow, inevitable, and hidden. The ocean floor, made of basaltic crust, is not as still as it seems. It is born at spreading ridges where magma rises and cools, forming newborn seafloor in quiet fire. But nothing on this planet remains untouched forever. As it moves outward from the ridges, the ocean crust ages, it thickens, it grows heavier, until finally it sinks. At subduction zones, deep marine trenches at the edges of continents, the old ocean floor bends downward and slips beneath another tectonic plate, not quickly, not violently, but with the slow gravity of memory returning to silence. This is the hourglass of the subducted world. Landscapes, whole swaths of crust once teeming with marine life, with volcanic islands, with coral crowns now long erased, are drawn downward into the mantle, melting slowly into the deep earth's forgotten layers. It is a kind of burial, a quiet swallowing, memory turned to magma. And yet, not all is lost. Some minerals resist. They endure the heat, the crushing pressure, the chemical shift. Tiny crystals like lawsonite, cosite and jadeite, stable only under extreme conditions, form in these descending slabs. They are the stubborn witnesses, the ones who hold their shape when all else liquefies. And occasionally, through faulting and uplift, they return. Metamorphic rocks from deep subduction rise again, pushed upward through colliding plates, brought back to the surface, not as what they once were, but as transformed storytellers. In the Alps, in the Himalayas, in California's coastal ranges, we find these high-pressure, low-temperature rocks, the ghosts of oceans swallowed and reborn. Their minerals speak in isotopes, in crystalline structures, in oxygen ratios and zircon inclusions. They tell of water dragged down into the mantle, of carbon subducted in limestone and released again in volcanoes, of time, not erased but rewritten. Because subduction is not only destruction, it is also recycling. The crust that melts becomes new magma. That magma may rise, erupt, cool, forming new crust, new mountains, new soils. What is drawn down in one age becomes the foundation of another. The earth in this way behaves like an hourglass. The upper crust trickles downward, the mantle reshapes it, and over eons the sand returns. But the grains are never quite the same. Geologists now believe that water from subducted slabs may soften the mantle, helping trigger melting, that volatiles like carbon and chlorine, carried deep from the surface, influence the chemistry of volcanoes, that the cycles of weathering, erosion, burial, and subduction spanning hundreds of millions of years are the breathwork of the planet itself. Each tectonic plate becomes a memory carrier, each subduction zone a passageway into forgetting and becoming, and we live on the surface, on borrowed ground, on continents stitched together by long-forgotten oceans, built from rocks that were once deep beneath the sea, crushed and transformed, and lifted into light, We quarry those rocks. We walk across them. We build cities on their shoulders, rarely asking where they came from. But sometimes we listen to the tremble of earthquakes, the voice of subduction, to the sulphurous breath of volcanic arcs, the exhale of recycled seafloor, to the shimmer of jade, crystallized from pressure that once gripped the edge of a lost world. And in listening, we remember something essential, that forgetting is not the end of memory, it is part of how the earth remembers differently. It does not keep the shape of things, it keeps the essence, and brings it back, changed. So when we look into the mouth of a trench, or climb a mountain made of ancient seabed, we are touching both the past and its transformation. We are standing at the narrow waist of the hourglass, where descent becomes ascent, where the buried becomes the born. And yet, if even erased seafloors can rise again as mountains, what stories might the mantle still be shaping in secret? From that slow recycling beneath our feet, we rise once more, not to the surface but to the shimmer above it, to light. It has always been here, streaming from the sun in a silent cascade, striking the earth without invitation or applause. For billions of years, light arrived, unnoticed. There were no eyes to receive it, no leaves to drink it, no names to call it day, just photons falling across lava plains, over oceans, onto bare stone, painting nothing, witnessed by none. And still, it came. For a long time, life had no need for light. It began in the dark, deep near hydrothermal vents, where chemosynthesis, not photosynthesis, shaped the earliest metabolisms. There microbes lived on minerals, on heat, on the soft chemistry of the earth's breath, but light was patient. Eventually, near the ocean's surface, in shallow waters, where the sun's rays could filter through the haze, some cells evolved a new trick to catch photons and convert their energy into food. Photosynthesis was not born in color. It emerged as a quiet shift in molecular choreography, the rise of chlorophyll, the release of oxygen, the slow saturation of oceans with breath. Still, no one saw it happen. The first photosynthetic lifeforms were simple: cyanobacteria, stromatolite builders, tiny architects that layered themselves in microbial mats, leaving behind stony pillows of time. They didn't see the light, they used it. And in using it, they began to change the planet. Oxygen trickled into the air, transforming the chemistry of the oceans, setting the stage for multicellular life, for bodies, for motion, for thought. But sight would come much later. It wasn't until around 500 million years ago, nearly 3 billion years after photosynthesis began, that complex eyes evolved. The Cambrian period, often called the biological Big Bang, saw the sudden flourishing of vision: trilobites with compound eyes, nautiloids with pinhole pupils. The first gaze lifted toward the light. By then, sunlight had already shaped climates, sculpted landscapes, driven winds, evaporated seas. It had been the brush behind every shadow and the warmth behind every rain. But none had witnessed it. Light is one of the rare miracles that does not require an audience. It exists whether or not it is seen. It gives even when it is not received. And perhaps that's what makes it so fundamental. Its generosity, its constancy. Even today we see only a small portion of the light that arrives. The visible spectrum, that thin slice we call color, is a narrow band. Ultraviolet, infrared, gamma rays, all pass through or around us, shaping life and landscape in ways we rarely perceive. Plants still follow it, turning their leaves like quiet satellites. Animals migrate by its angle. Coral time their spawning with the full moon's glow. Reflected sunlight, echoed back in rhythm, and we too are drawn to it. Not just for warmth or growth, but for meaning. Light carries memory. Photons from distant stars cross eons to meet our eyes. Sunlight that left the sun 8 minutes ago warms our skin. Even in photographs, Even in cave paintings, light becomes a kind of language, and yet it does not need us. It does not need to be seen to do its work. Maybe that is the lesson, that some things, the most powerful things, do not seek recognition. They simply are. Photosynthesis did not begin with celebration. It began with necessity, with a cell adapting, with a molecule opening to the sun, and in that opening, the planet changed. So when we feel sunlight on our face, or see it scatter through leaves, or watch it shimmer across water, we are partaking in something ancient, something that waited longer than any fossil, something that shaped the world long before it was seen. And perhaps not all miracles need to be seen to shape the world. And yes, if light has always been present, shaping life in silence, what other unseen forces might still be carrying us forward? From the shimmer of invisible light, we drift down again, gently, slowly, to where starlight ends and stone begins, in riverbeds long since dried, in deserts wind-carved and open to the sky, in glacial moraines and polar silence, small dark fragments wait, speckled with nickel, rich in cosmic memory, meteorites, not rocks of Earth, but visitors, ancient exiles from beyond our sky, some born in the violent crusts of early planets, some broken from asteroids that never became worlds, others perhaps dust from the edges of stars cooled into silence. They fall quietly now, one here, one there. A slow planetary snow of memory. Most disintegrate consumed in fire as they kiss the upper atmosphere, but some endure. They fall and wait, unnoticed for centuries, until we find them. And when we do, when we touch their pitted skin and weigh their dense cores, we touch something older than the Earth itself. Many meteorites predate our planet. They are remnants of the early solar system, unchanged since dust first swirled in the gravity of a newborn sun. They hold chondrules, tiny molten spheres frozen in motion, the marbles of creation. They carry iron, nickel, phosphorus, and in carbonaceous chondrites, even amino acids, the building blocks of life, which begs the question, did life begin here or elsewhere? Did the spark arrive on ice, or in dust, or buried in stone from another world? We may never know, but the chemistry aligns. Carbon from space is the same carbon in our cells. The iron in our blood could well have come from a shattered core of a moonlet we've never named. We are made of earth, yes, but earth too was made of dust. Cosmic dust, recycled from dead stars, collided, forged, reformed. The bones beneath our skin, the calcium in our teeth, the oxygen we breathe, the gold in our rings, all of it, stardust. We are the debris of ancient explosions, the cooled breath of supernovae, the aftermath of collisions we never saw. Meteorites remind us of this. They carry no message, and yet they speak. They show us a universe where destruction and creation are the same motion, where exile brings new beginnings, where dust falls and then becomes something else. Even now, planetary scientists examine them under microscopes, measure their isotopic ratios, compare their oxygen signatures to Mars, to the Moon, to the asteroid belt. They try to trace their story. Some meteorites may be fragments from Martian crust, blasted into space by ancient impacts. Others may come from Theia, the theorized planetary body that collided with Earth and helped form the Moon. And so, the pebble found in the Sahara might be a remnant of a lost world, a shard of history, with no planet left to call home, and yet in a way, it has found one, because we pick them up, we hold them, we listen, and maybe unknowingly, we continue their journey, because we are not separate from them. We carry meteorite elements in every cell. We are forged from the same origin, the same dust, rearranged. And isn't that what memory is? Not a perfect record, but a presence, a substance that lingers. So when we look at the stars, longing, wondering, perhaps we are not reaching outward, but inward, remembering. because the dust that became us never truly left the sky. And yet, if exile can become breath, what else might the universe be remembering through us? From the falling ash of ancient stars, we come back to Earth, to the humid silence of a time when forests ruled the world, long before deserts, before grasses, before flowers. The land was a lush and breathing maze of green. It was the Carboniferous. 300 million years ago, the continents were warm, wet, and draped in endless canopy. Trees towered in silence, thick-trunked lycopsids, sprawling horsetails, fern-like giants that knew no flowering but reached toward the light with fractal grace. Beneath them, the ground was soft with decay. Spore clouds drifted through the muggy air. Insects with wingspans like hawks beat through the underbrush. Dragonflies, millipedes, silent gliders. It was a world tuned to a different rhythm. Thicker oxygen, slower growth, a deeper green, and when these forests fell, as all things must, they did not fully vanish. They sank, layer by layer, tree by tree they collapsed into the wet ground. Moss, bark, roots pressed into peat, peat pressed into lignite, lignite pressed into coal, and so a rainforest became stone, compressed beneath sediments, warmed by time, changed by the quiet language of pressure. These forests turned to black seams in the crust, dark, gleaming ribbons that cut through shale and sandstone, coal beds. We find them now beneath cities, beneath farmland, beneath deserts, where no tree has stood in 1,000 years. We mine them, we burn them, we build our modern world on their ancient heat, and in doing so, we awaken the breath of forgotten forests, releasing the carbon they once captured, the sunlight they once stored. It is not without consequence. But before coal was industry, it was memory. If you hold a piece of coal in your hand, you are holding leaves, bark, ferns, the cell walls of trees whose names we do not know. Sometimes the structure is still visible, veins of foliage, echoes of wood grain, the imprint of spores, a negative photograph of life, inverted by time. This is fossilization, not by replacement, but by compression, by silence, by weight. It is not just matter, it is mood, and in that mood, perhaps something lingers. We cannot hear the insects anymore. We cannot feel the shade of those immense trunks, nor smell the musk of mosses warmed by sun. But perhaps the seams remember, perhaps somewhere deep in those layers, a fragment of bird song, not yet born, not yet evolved, waits in the still dark heart of carbon. It would not be a song we recognize, not melody, not call, but pattern, the same pattern that pulses in chlorophyll, in spirals of fern, in the branching geometry of roots, the same pattern that would one day give rise to lungs and wings and breath. The coal does not sing, but it contains the memory of song, and when it burns, we are not just consuming energy, we are unfolding time, releasing sunlight captured before mammals, before birds, before even flowers opened to the sky. It is a paradox. The forest's death became the fuel of our life, and in that exchange, something is remembered, even as something is lost. Now, in satellite images, we trace deforestation in warming oceans, we watch coral fade. In polar air, we measure the gases released from burning those long-dead trees. The earth notices, and yet it also endures, because forests return. They regrow, sometimes in the cracks of cities, sometimes across ancient scars. The memory of green is hard to erase. It waits in seeds, in spores, in soil, and perhaps in us. We carry forest in our lungs, in the oxygen that trees once gave. We carry it in our senses, in the way we listen for rustling leaves, in the way we feel at home beneath a canopy. The pulse continues, not loudly, not always visibly, but it's there, beneath the asphalt, beneath the mine, beneath the history we write on the surface. And yet, If the forests of stone can still teach us to breathe, what other rhythms might we have yet to remember? From the soot-streaked seams of ancient green, we rise into the present, the loudest layer yet written, a thin veneer of time, and yet already it leaves a trace. Geologists of the far future, if such eyes ever exist, may find our layer and wonder not at bones or shells, but at plastic, melted polymers buried in estuaries, microplastics sealed in Arctic ice, fragments of shopping bags fossilized into rock. These are our technofossils, the relics of an age defined not by stone or bronze or steam, but by synthetic residue, radioactive half-lives, and sudden change. Concrete forms a new kind of limestone. Aluminum compacts like sediment. Nuclear isotopes mark the pulse of 1945, like a geologic fingerprint. Tritium and cesium and plutonium dust, settling into the soil. We leave behind not just tools or cities, but entire systems, power grids, etched into ground, fiber optic routes, branching across continents, cell phones buried like trilobites in forgotten drawers. Some things will vanish. Steel will rust, wood will rot, data will corrupt. But some things will last longer than we do. A layer of asphalt, hardened into crust, the peculiar chemistry of synthetic dyes, the sudden bloom of nitrogen in soil from global agriculture, and the carbon, so much carbon spiked, curved, screaming in the ice cores like a siren recording our breath, our engines, our flame. We call this time the Anthropocene, the age of us. A moment really, geologically a blink, and yet the signal is sharp, stronger than any extinction since the dinosaurs, faster than any climate swing in the past 800,000 years, louder than any species has ever spoken into the crust of the earth. And so we ask, what will remain? A landfill, compressed by pressure, may resemble a reef. A skyscraper, eroded and crumbled, may leave a chemical shadow in the sediment. A plastic bottle buried deep may endure longer than language. It is strange to think of ourselves as strata, to imagine that we too are becoming layers, not just as individuals, but as a civilization. We are becoming sediment, signal, noise. Some fossils are beautiful, delicate shells, amber-preserved wings, the curve of a jawbone, but ours may not be beautiful. Ours may be neon-coloured, unbiodegradable, isotopically marked. Will the Earth mourn us? Or will it simply record us, the way it records volcanoes, or impact craters, or extinction events? It has done this before. Mass extinctions, 5 of them, each one reshaped the biosphere, rewrote the cast of characters. Now, perhaps we are both the authors and the 6th, but the Earth does not grieve in the way we do. It does not cry. It transforms. It takes what it is given, heat, pressure, decay, and rearranges it. Coal becomes diamond, bones become limestone, cities become dust. And yet some part remains, not to remember us, but to remember the conditions in which we lived. So perhaps that is the legacy. Not our names, not our monuments, but our chemistry, our fingerprint, left in the rock. Still we wonder, is there grace in being remembered this way, in being reduced to signal? Is there poetry in the plastic? Perhaps not. But perhaps there is truth, because in the end, we are not separate from the planet. We are its latest expression, its brief experiment in consciousness, in abstraction, in flame. And when we are gone, when our layer is sealed and compressed, we will be part of the Earth again. A strange part. Yes, but a part nonetheless. And yet, if the future reads us only by our residue, what story will they think we were trying to tell? Beneath the weight of our inventions, our cities, our restless machinery, the ground waits, not passively, not in silence, but with a kind of breath, because even stone is not still. It shifts, it responds, it inhales and exhales in rhythms too slow for lungs to notice, but too steady to ignore. This is not poetry, it is chemistry, a quiet, geologic respiration. Take basalt born in volcanic fire, dark and fine-grained, as it cools on the ocean floor, or from the heart of lava flows. It draws in carbon dioxide from seawater, forming carbonate crusts over centuries. It breathes inward, capturing the air and sealing it in minerals. Now take limestone, soft, pale, a memory of ancient seas. It absorbs gases too, but more deeply, through dissolution and weathering. It reacts with water and air, altering its structure over time. And shale, that thin, flaky stone formed from ancient mud. It exhales methane and organic compounds when crushed or warmed. A slow mineral whisper, every rock type speaks differently, but together they form a kind of planetary lung, a system of exchanges between crust and sky, between land and atmosphere. Scientists call it the geochemical carbon cycle, a dance of carbon through rock, air, ocean, and life. But beneath the data is something more intimate, a sense that the planet is breathing, slowly through its stones. Even caves exhale. If you step inside a limestone cavern, you can feel the shift in air, cooler, denser, often filled with trace gases released from rock. Sometimes you can smell it, the mineral tang of old earth. And in the mountains, on cold mornings, frost creeps from cracks in the cliffs, the breath of stone meeting the sky, made visible in vapor. These are not metaphors, they are facts. Rock is porous, it is reactive, it is alive in a way we do not often allow ourselves to understand. Some stones are repositories of time. They hold not just age, but interaction. Layers of gas trapped in mineral pockets, tiny isotopic signatures, like the heartbeat of a former atmosphere, sealed away for scientists to measure. And through this breath, slow, ancient, unceasing, the Earth adjusts itself. Over millions of years, weathering of silicate rocks pulls carbon from the air, volcanoes return it, subduction buries it, metamorphism reshapes it. It is not a cycle we can see, but it is happening beneath every step, every mountain, every forgotten plain, and we are part of it. The carbon in our bodies, in our breath, our bones, was once in stone, and will be again. When we burn fossil fuels, we are not just releasing energy, we are reversing breath, turning ancient inhalation into sudden exhale. The planet feels it, and still it breathes, not as punishment, not as forgiveness, but as motion, slow, rhythmic, relentless. We tend to imagine the Earth as solid, still, a foundation, but it is more than that. It is dynamic, permeable, sensitive. Stone, once thought to be the very image of permanence, is in fact a medium of change. Even granite weathers, even marble dissolves, and in those transformations, the Earth writes its story, one exchange at a time, one breath per century, or 10,000 years. So when you touch a rock on a trail, in a canyon, on the side of a road, know that it is not asleep, it is responding, shifting, listening to the wind, to the water, to the air around it, and maybe, just maybe, to us, because in this slow conversation we are not separate. We breathe the atmosphere, the rocks shape it, and the balance continues, invisible, incredible, enduring. And yet, if stone can carry the memory of air, what other rhythms might we still be learning to hear? From the slow breath of stone we look outward, across the ridges, across the skyline, across the jagged silhouettes that mark the rise of memory. Mountain, to the eye, they seem like borders, barriers, distant symbols of stillness, but they are not still. They are time, folded. Every ridge, every tilted cliff face, every contorted seam of rock you see was once a flat bed, a sea floor, a layer of dust pressed into stone, laid down gently, layer after layer, sand becoming sandstone, mud becoming shale, life becoming limestone. For hundreds of millions of years, these layers slept, stacked like pages, pressed by weight, hidden in quiet, and then something moved. Tectonic forces, slow, invisible, but immense, collided two plates, and time crumpled. What was once horizontal was pushed upward, bent, lifted. In places, vertical seams now stand like ancient books open to the wind. In others, entire folds of crust arc into view, revealing stories that were never meant to rise. This is orogeny, the birth of mountains, and with each mountain range, a different memory is pulled from the depths. In the Himalayas, seashells are found at 8,000 meters, the whispers of a vanished ocean lifted skyward. In the Rockies, billion-year-old granite cuts through younger limestone, time exposed out of sequence, rearranged by force. And in the Scottish Highlands, twisted schists and gneiss speak of ancient collisions, Rodinia's collapse, Gondwana's rise, Pangaea's breath. Mountains are not just height, they are history revealed. Geologists walk their flanks, not only for beauty, but for chronology. They read layers like sentences, this one from the Cambrian, this one from the Ordovician, this fault marking the moment of upheaval, and every now and then they find something astonishing, an unconformity, a place where layers are missing, eroded, vanished, never deposited, gaps in time. The silences between chapters. The Grand Canyon holds one such silence, where 250 million years are missing between two beds of stone, time, folded, lost, and resumed. But even absence has meaning, because what remains, what has risen, is the Earth's attempt to speak. It does not speak in language, but in pattern, in tilt, in color, in fossil, in the way a cliff face leans, or the angle of a quartz seam glimmers in light. We often think of geology as what is buried, but perhaps it is better understood as what returns. Mountains are Earth's memory made vertical. They weather, they crumble, they feed rivers and shape clouds. But they also reveal, they are the planet's way of turning itself inside out, of reminding us that below the surface, always, is something older, and sometimes, just sometimes, something holy. Because in a mountain we see the scale of things, not just in height, but in time. To stand beside a tilted stratum of quartzite is to stand beside 500 million years of rain compression, metamorphosis, and upheaval. To touch it is to bridge silence and song, and it changes us. Not loudly, but in the slow way the Earth itself changes, through pressure, through time, through the patient rearrangement of understanding. Even the air feels different at altitude, thinner, yes, but also older, as if the mountain is still exhaling its history, and we, brief, curious, breathing, are simply here to listen. So let us listen, to the folds, to the faults, to the seams in the cliffs that mark the rhythm of uplift. Because the Earth is trying to tell its story, layer by layer, fold by fold, not to impress us, but to remember itself. And yet, if time can rise from the ground in waves of stone, what deeper memories might still be waiting to surface from the folded mountains, pages of earth bent open? We move inward now to something smaller, subtler, not continents, not strata, but the hidden precision inside a single grain, crystals. They grow without voice, without haste. They form deep beneath volcanoes, inside cooling magma, within high-pressure faults, even in the soft spaces between sediment layers, and in their structure, they keep records of heat, of chemistry, of time. To the eye, a crystal is clarity, a glimmer, a shard of light, caught in geometry. But to a geologist, a crystal is a library, a silent text composed not in letters, but in atoms, ordered, repeated, bound by symmetry. Each layer is a sentence of circumstance, how hot it was, how quickly the melt cooled, what elements were present, What forces pressed and shaped the lattice, from formlessness into form, and among all crystals, one stands above the rest for its memory. Zircon, tiny, resilient, ancient. Zircons can survive everything: heat, pressure, erosion, even time itself. They endure while their host rocks melt away. They drift through geologic cycles and reappear intact, unchanged, still glowing with the secrets of deep earth. Some zircons are over 4.3 billion years old, older than the moon, older than oceans, older than Earth's crust as we know it. They are Earth's first storytellers. Locked within them are isotopic ratios, uranium decaying to lead a clock so precise it can date their birth within a few million years, a heartbeat slowed to the pace of eons. Through them we know when the Earth first cooled, when water appeared, when continents first congealed like skin over a molten wound. Zircons tell us that the early Earth was not just chaos and lava. It had quiet. It had places where crystals could form, and thus where memory could begin. Other crystals too speak. Quartz born of heat, grown in veins, strong yet brittle. Its clarity carries the pulse of mineral-rich fluids. It lines geodes like frozen breath. Calcite, soft, responsive. It traps the chemistry of oceans growing in shells, caves and coral reefs. Its twinnings, its luminescence, all notes in a Paleolithic song. Garnet, deep red, pressure forged. Its zones record metamorphism like rings in a tree, each layer a phase of burial and rebirth. And then there are the ice crystals, fragile, fleeting, yet rich with atmospheric memory. From Antarctic cores they reveal CO2 levels, ancient snowfalls, volcanic ash. Crystals do not speak in sound, they do not write in ink, but they are language, the Earth's first language, perhaps, a language of lattice, of bond angles, of elements held in stillness. We decode them now with lasers, with microscopes, with mass spectrometers. We listen with tools, but long before us, they were already forming, already keeping time. And maybe, just maybe, we didn't invent language. Maybe we inherited it, not from ancestors, but from the planet itself. Maybe the first stories were written in feldspar, the first declarations frozen in olivine, the first longing stored in a zircon grain drifting in metamorphic stone. We say the earth is silent, but it's only because we haven't always known how to listen. Now when a geologist holds a crystal to the light, they are not just admiring its beauty, they are reading, they are learning, they are translating, and in that act, the quiet bond between matter and memory is renewed, because we too are crystalline. Our bones, our salts, our very blood, full of dissolved minerals shaped by the world we walk upon. We are, in some part, lattices ourselves, living archives. And yet, if crystals can remember the birth of oceans, what ancient language might still be echoing in the minerals within us? Follow that echo downward, into the dark, into the hollows beneath the hills and plateaus, into the breathless chambers where the wind waits, but never speaks. Caves, carved not by hands but by water, slow, persistent, curious. Over eons, droplets seep through cracks in limestone, carrying with them a soft acidity. Carbonic whispers formed from rain and air. The stone dissolves grain by grain, passage by passage, until the earth opens its mouth in silence. No light, no weather, no rush, only time, dripping. Inside, stalactites reach down like ancient thoughts, growing millimeter by millimeter with each drop that lingers long enough to leave behind a trace of mineral. Calcium carbonate, hardened by patience. Below, stalagmites rise, the mirrored dreams of the ceiling. Together they form columns, bridges, frozen gestures in the dark. Each layer of calcite holds a fingerprint of the world above, the amount of rainfall, the ratio of oxygen isotopes, the chemical composition of air that has long since changed. In this way, Caves remember what the surface forgets. They are not empty. They are archives. Within their silence, bats roost, blind fish swim in black rivers, and bacteria live on rock, digesting minerals with no sunlight at all. Here, ecosystems drift in isolation, evolving without clocks, without seasons. But caves are not only biological, they are emotional. Stepping into one is not like walking into a room. It is like walking into time itself, slowed, hushed, made physical. Even sound behaves differently. The walls do not echo sharply, but carry voices like fog, softened, prolonged, made ancient. In some traditions, caves are considered wombs of the earth, places of birth, transformation, return. Ancient peoples came here to paint, to bury, to dream, and perhaps the earth dreams too, within these voids. Because caves form not in chaos, but in rhythm. Each mineral bloom, each ripple of flowstone, each dry pool rimmed with crystals, is a record of passage, of time, of silence thick enough to settle into form. And when wind passes through, as it sometimes does, finding cracks between chambers, it becomes something different. Not breeze, but breath. It enters cold, touches nothing, and leaves changed, as if the cave took something from it. A note, a tone, a memory. We call this wind, but perhaps it is listening. Perhaps in these hollows, the wind pauses, it waits, it holds space for the songs it never sang. And we light our way in with lanterns and helmets. We take samples, we leave footprints, we measure the slow drip of stalagmites with patient equipment. We name the chambers, but sometimes we simply stop and listen to the stillness, to the drop, to the waiting. Because in that moment, we understand that caves are not absence, they are presence, drawn inward, a presence that does not shout, but endures, like the earth's second skin, cool, quiet, inward-facing, and alive. So the next time you pass a limestone ridge, or notice a dark opening at the base of a bluff, know this: there is a room beneath you where centuries are still dripping, where air moves not for weather, but for memory. And yet, if the wind still waits in the hollows of stone, what deeper silence might it one day carry back to the surface? Let us listen now to a different silence, one not found in caves or mountains, but resting beneath the quiet shimmer of ancient seas. Because once, life bloomed not with a whisper, but with a sudden alien flourish. The Cambrian. 500 million years ago, the Earth's oceans stirred with invention. Before this, life had moved slowly, single-celled, soft-bodied, almost invisible in its persistence. But then, in a blink of geological time, everything changed. Fins unfolded, eyes opened, armor clinked into place. In shallow coastal waters, clear, warm, and mineral-rich, biology took a risk. The genetic wheel turned faster. Skeletons formed, jaws emerged, color may have bloomed. We call it the Cambrian explosion, but it was not loud. It was a blooming, vast and strange, a complexity unfurling like a new kind of tide. Trilobites scuttled across seafloors, their compound eyes scanning light in a world that had only just learned to see. A Pibinia swam with 5 eyes and a backward-facing mouth. Hallucigenia walked on spines, its anatomy so bizarre it was once reconstructed upside down. Anomalocaris, a predator with a radial jaw and flaps for swimming, cruised the currents like a dream designed without rules. And all of it, all that alien wonder, is gone, or rather transformed. The strange shapes of the Cambrian do not walk the earth today, but they left traces in sandstone, in shale, in the Burgess Shale of Canada, the Chang'an fossils of China, places where silt settled gently enough to preserve soft tissue, eye stalks, nerve cords, digestive tracts, ghosts, etched into stone. Fossils are often bones, but these are memories, the imprint of a body not meant to last, the curve of a limb that has no modern name, and in those fossils we read the Earth's first real poem of form, the moment when nature became ambitious. It is easy to imagine this time as alien, too far, too strange, but the Cambrian lives on in us, in the way we see, in the way our nerves branch, in the rhythm of bilateral symmetry, in the echoes of genes that first danced during this bloom. Even now, biologists find ancient genetic toolkits, Hox genes, patterning genes, the scripts that shape limbs and faces. They are old. They were writing long before vertebrates existed, and so the Cambrian isn't lost. It's embedded. But what of the forms that didn't survive, the ones with no descendants, the monsters of symmetry we never repeated? Do they linger? Does the ocean remember them? When waves break over coral reefs, when light filters through kelp forests, when deep-sea vents breathe mineral-rich clouds into the abyss, perhaps somewhere in that movement, a pattern remains, not in life, but in the possibility of life, because the ocean is still a cradle, still inventing, still dreaming. New species are found every year, jellyfish that pulse with blue fire, shrimp that snap with sonic shock waves, creatures with translucent bodies, bioluminescent ribs and spiral-shaped eggs. The Cambrian dream never fully ended. It went quiet. It went deep. But beneath the sediment, beneath our classifications and tidy taxonomies, there is still wildness. There is still imagination, somewhere in the DNA of an octopus, or the spiral path of a plankton. The ghosts stir, not to return, but to remind that life is not a ladder. It is a bloom, a tangle, a radiance spreading in all directions at once, and we are one thread of that bloom, one continuation of a moment when the sea dared to become something more. And yet, if ancient oceans could dream such strange and beautiful shapes, what might they still be imagining in the depths beyond our sight? Perhaps they dream too of what rises above them, the spines of continents, the summits that once loomed high above cloud and forest, mountains. But even they are not eternal. For all their grandeur, all their power, all their sky-brushing presence, mountains wear away. They seem permanent, solid, unyielding. But time has no need for force. It needs only patience. Raindrop by raindrop, frost by thaw, root by crack, mountains unravel. Erosion is not sudden. It is the soft breath of change. Wind carrying dust from ridge to dune, glaciers grinding peaks into powder, rivers carving canyons, gently but forever. What was once the roof of the world becomes sediment, becomes soil, becomes beach. The high becomes low, the vast dispersed, and the evidence is everywhere. Quartz grains, born in alpine heights, now glitter in riverbeds, or lie scattered in the warm folds of a child's palm by the sea, each grain a memory. A summit, now shadow. We walk on the remains of giants. The Appalachian Mountains, now green and rolling, were once Himalayan in scale, their jagged edges smoothed by hundreds of millions of years. Time folded them, erosion humbled them, but they still sing in the curve of the hills, in the rounded stones that line their streams. The Scottish Highlands, the Urals, the Pilbara, all are whispers of former immensity, and in the sand beneath our feet, the mountain endures just rearranged sediment, carries the signature of source. It holds mineral clues, feldspar, mica, garnet, zircon, each a remnant of height, now dispersed by gravity and rain. The journey of a single rock, broken and broken again, is not an end. It is a story of return, because those grains may someday be buried, compressed, fused into sandstone or schist, and in another age, lifted once more. This is the rock cycle, not just as science, but as patience, as resurrection. Even the mightiest cliffs, the boldest ranges, return to silence, and perhaps that is the lesson, that nothing is too great to soften, that even the sharpest summit yields to wind. But this is not loss. It is transformation, because in their wearing down, mountains feed the world, their dust nourishes valleys, their minerals enrich deltas, their collapse gives rise to renewal. We may think of silence as absence, but in geology, silence is presence made soft. The silence of a rounded hill that once stood like a blade, the silence of sand that once screamed as granite, the silence of a shoreline glowing with quartz, sunlight caught in forgotten summits, and still the earth turns, rising, wearing, returning. It does not mourn what it loses, it reshapes. So when you stand before a jagged peak, know that it too will one day bow, and when you hold a grain of sand, know that it once touched the sky, and so did we. We build atop high places, we seek their views, we breathe more deeply when close to the clouds. But perhaps the deepest breath is the one taken at sea level, in the presence of dust that once was mounting, because all things return, not in defeat, but in rhythm. And yet, if even the tallest peaks become shadows, what of us might one day return in glimmering grains of memory? Now we move beyond the mountains, beyond the forests and sands, to the edges of the world, where silence becomes solid, and time freezes mid-breath. The ice, in Antarctica, in Greenland, in alpine sheets pressed between summits, the glaciers sleep, or so it seems, but within them lies a clarity no parchment can hold, no fossil can sing. Air, tiny, ancient air, trapped in bubbles no larger than a tear, held in columns of ice, layered year upon year, snow upon snow, breath upon breath, ice cores. They are the memory columns, drilled deep into ancient ice, pulled slowly from depths where sunlight never lingers. And inside them, history, inhalation, fire, stillness. Each layer is a season, each bubble is a sentence. Carbon dioxide levels rise and fall with the warmth of ages. Methane spikes whisper of wetlands blooming, or of ancient peat set ablaze. Ash layers tell of volcanic veils spread across the globe. Lead and soot mark the rise of industry. And in between, silence, not the absence of data, but the presence of calm. The ice does not speak loudly. It murmurs. It sighs with information. Oxygen isotopes that measure temperature, hydrogen ratios that map the rhythm of snow. From the deepest cores, we pull back 800,000 years of breath, of atmosphere, of planetary pulse. We learn that the Earth breathes in cycles, glacial, interglacial, cold, warm, cold again. And in that rhythm, we find ourselves, our emergence, our disruption. The last 10,000 years, the Holocene, are but a sliver, a brief interglacial calm in which agriculture began. Cities rose, language took root, and yet the ice remembers more than we do. It remembers sudden climate shifts, the younger Dryas, a sharp return to cold after a warming, the Little Ice Age, a shiver that crept through medieval forests. It remembers the dark veil of Tambora in 1815, a volcanic winter, a year without summer. It remembers when the air held less carbon, when the planet cooled slowly, predictably before we altered the pulse, and now the ice is melting. The pages of this diary are dissolving, each drop a lost word, each retreating glacier a chapter vanishing before we've read it. But for now, much remains. Still frozen, still listening. Within some cores, researchers have even found pollen, carried by winds from distant meadows, tiny plant memories, frozen mid-flight. Other layers trap traces of human history, lead from Roman mines, sulfate from medieval burning, nuclear signatures from mid-century tests. The ice is not biased. It records whatever the sky offers, and perhaps that makes it honest, not emotional, not narrative, but complete, a planetary diary, unaware of its own wisdom. To walk upon a glacier is to walk on breath. To press your palm to a core of ancient ice is to touch the same air a mammoth once knew. To inhale near a crevasse is to breathe in the future of oceans, the fate of coasts because the ice is melting, and the memory is running downhill, but still, we listen. We send teams each year, scientists in insulated suits, loggers, readers, interpreters of frost. They read the bubbles, the dust, the crystals that align like microscopic compass needles. And what they find is not always comforting, but it is always clear. The earth remembers what we exhale. It keeps it, measures it, preserves it in cold until we are ready to understand. And now, perhaps, we are. The past lives in the cold, but the future will be warm, and what we do now will become the next layer, the next breath, frozen or not. So when you see snow fall or frost on a window, or the blue glow of a distant glacier, remember, you are looking at memory frozen not to forget, but to preserve, to offer, to share. And yet, if the ice has held this much silence, what else might be waiting beneath the cold, still willing to speak before it melts away? Now we shift again, not through sediment, nor snow, but through direction itself, because even the compass is not as constant as it seems. There are times when north becomes south, no great trumpet sounds, no surface cataclysm marks the change, and yet, deep within the earth, something turns. This is magnetic reversal, the invisible field that shields our planet, the magnetosphere that bends solar wind, that guides birds, whales and satellites alike. Flips. It has happened many times before, hundreds over hundreds of millions of years, sometimes as brief flickers, other times as full reversals, lasting tens of thousands of years. And we know this not from memory, but from stone. When lava cools, iron-rich minerals within it align with the Earth's magnetic field, like compass needles frozen in place. Layer by layer, flows of basalt record the direction of magnetic north at the time they hardened. In these rocks, along mid-ocean ridges, across volcanic plains, beneath our feet, are stripes of memory, normal polarity, reversed polarity, then normal again, like barcodes, like breaths, in the layered sediments of the seafloor, in the hardened cores of ancient lavas. We find this pattern. The last major reversal, the Brunner's meteora, occurred about 780,000 years ago, before Homo sapiens walked the earth. The field did not vanish, it simply weakened, wandered, shifted, then reformed in the opposite direction. But why? We look inward. The source of Earth's magnetism lies in the outer core, a vast ocean of molten iron and nickel, churning, convecting, spinning with the planet. This movement generates electric currents, which create the magnetic field, a geodynamo of molten memory. But like all living systems, it fluctuates, patterns emerge, then dissolve. The field shifts slowly now. The magnetic North Pole is drifting at increasing speed, from Canada towards Siberia, migrating nearly 40 kilometers a year. This may be nothing, or it may be prelude, a weakening field, a drifting pole, a reminder that even deep stability is not fixed. And still, life continues. The planet has reversed before, and life has adapted. Birds still flew, mammals still breathed, corals still grew in rhythmic rings. But perhaps the deeper question is not how the field flips, but what it means. What does it say about the Earth, this quiet, unseen shift? Could it be that the planet itself is seeking a new alignment, a different symmetry, or is it simply entropy, a natural rearrangement of flow and form? We like to believe the Earth has a plan, but more often it has a rhythm, and the magnetic field may be just another note in that long, slow song. Even now, magnetotactic bacteria align themselves with the field. They leave chains of magnetite in lake sediments, tiny compass marks left in the dark. Their signatures, too, are memory, a biological echo of drift. We find such records in meteorites as well, suggesting that Mars once had a magnetic field of its own, a pulse that faded. Earth says not. It flickers, it wobbles, but it endures, and we live within its cocoon. It protects us from solar storms, shields the atmosphere, carries auroras across polar skies. So if it turns again, if north becomes south once more, we will adapt, just as the stones have. We will recalibrate, reorient. Remember that even direction is temporary, because perhaps at the heart of it, the planet is always turning inward and outward, seeking balance, not permanence. And yet, if even the core of the Earth can change direction, what certainties might we still be mistaking for truth? Perhaps the greatest illusion of life is that it endures, not the fact of life, but its form, its shape, its cast of characters, because almost everything that has ever lived is gone. Extinction is not rare. It is the rule. More than 99% of all species that ever stirred, swam, walked, or breathed on this planet have vanished, not in fire alone, not always in flood, but often in sleep, quiet disappearance over millennia, a thinning, a fading, until the last heartbeat echoes into silence. And yet, that silence speaks. It shapes the world we walk in. It defines the boundaries of what remains. The dinosaurs are gone, but the mammals moved into the quiet they left behind. The trilobites are gone, but the sea floor still remembers their paths. In etched limestone, the forests of the Carboniferous are long buried, but their roots shape the oxygen we now breathe. Even extinction leaves fingerprints. In the gaps, in the emptiness, in the absence that makes presence possible. We often think of extinction as an ending, but perhaps it is more like a pause, a breath held too long, a page left blank in the planetary diary. Some extinctions are soft, a slow unraveling of habitat, of climate, of population. Others are sharp, violent, sudden. The end Permian, when 90% of marine life vanished. The end Cretaceous, when an asteroid wrote a punctuation mark in stone. The late Devonian, the Ordovician, the Triassic. Mass extinctions, 5 by our count, clearing the slate, forcing evolution to rethink its shapes. But extinction is not always dramatic. Sometimes it's a song simply unsung again, a shell unformed, a feather that no longer fits the wind, and in that silence, something shifts, because life listens. When the ammonites were gone, cephalopods changed. When the megafauna fell, ecosystems rewrote themselves. And so extinction does not mean lifelessness. It means transformation, a pressure on what survives, a sculptor's hand made of absence. And we too are shaped by it. Our ancestors once shared the earth with other hominins, Neanderthals, Denisovans, shadowed cousins we barely knew. They're gone, but they left fragments in our genome, echoes in our blood, a touch of silence in our story. In this way, extinction is not erasure, it's a redistribution of memory. Fossils are part of that. But so is DNA, so is geology, so is imagination. Sometimes we resurrect the extinct in story, the woolly mammoth, the saber-toothed cat, the passenger pigeon. Sometimes we seek to bring them back with science, CRISPR and cloning and cells in storage. But even if we succeed, the world they knew is gone. What would they return to? Would they recognize the wind, the trees, the air? Or would they live as strangers in a habitat made of ghosts? Maybe it is not about bringing back what was. Maybe it is about honoring what is because of what isn't. Extinction teaches attention. It teaches reverence. Because the silence it leaves is not empty. It is instructive. The birds we hear today sing in the spaces once filled with other calls. The forest grow in soil enriched by what no longer breathes. Even the coral reefs, so fragile now, are built atop the bones of earlier life. Extinction is grief, yes, but also inheritance. And what do we inherit? Responsibility, wonder, a fleeting window in which to listen, not just to what lives, but to what has stopped living. because within that stillness is meaning. So the next time you see a fossil, or read a name etched in a paleontology chart, or walk through a landscape that feels older than your presence, pause, not in mourning, but in recognition that life is not just what we see, it is also what we remember, what we carry, what we learn not to forget. And yet, if silence is the greatest monument to those who came before, what wisdom might still be waiting in the spaces they left behind? From the hush of extinction, we move now into heat, into a deeper kind of silence, where pressure builds slowly, and the earth does not break, but exhales. Volcanoes, to us they seem like violence, explosions, fire, ash sweeping through sky. But the truth is gentler, older, slower. Volcanoes are not the earth breaking. They are the earth releasing. Molten rock, magma, forms beneath the crust in vast shifting chambers, fed by the decay of radioactive elements, by friction, by subduction. And when the pressure becomes too much, the earth opens a wound, not in rage, but in rhythm. Lava flows. It does not rush everywhere. It moves in glows and waves, slow rivers of fire cooling into black. Basalt plains stretch wide and silent. Shield volcanoes swell like breath held in stone. Pillow lavas form beneath the sea, round and strange, shaped by the weight of water. This is not destruction. It is formation. Islands rise from these fires. Hawaii, Iceland, the Galapagos, birthplaces of new ecosystems, forged in molten patience. Lava cools, and when it does, it hardens into the bones of tomorrow. The Arthur Petio flows become soil, the ash becomes sediment, the pumice becomes scaffold for coral and forest alike. Even where eruption seems to erase, forests buried, skies darkened, the lull that follows is fertile. Seeds find cracks in cooling stone. Ferns grow where heat once roared. Lichens whisper into obsidian, and in time, animals return. Soil deepens. Streams find new paths. A world begins again. We often forget that the crust we walk on, our continents, our mountains, our valleys, was once all molten. All of it, liquid fire, cooling into silence. Every granite ridge, every pebble of rhyolite, was once heat. We build our homes on cooled lava. We quarry basalt for roads. We hold obsidian in our hands as if it were a jewel. And it is, a jewel made from time stilled in temperature. Even the minerals born in volcanoes are keepers of future life. Zeolites for water. Peridot for mantle secrets. Sulfur for soil. Ash for growth, and deeper still, volcanoes shape climate. Their gases influence the sky, their dust seeds clouds, their eruptions write short chapters in the atmosphere's book. Some bring cooling, some bring warmth, but all remind us the earth is not quiet. It speaks in warmth, in pulse, in release, and yet we tend to hear only the blast, not the lull. But after every eruption there is a long breath, a stillness, a rebuilding. The earth sighs, and in that sigh, possibility settles. There are places where the lava flows are so old, they no longer look like fire. They've become green hills, wine valleys, cities. They've become background. But beneath the vineyards of France, beneath the rice terraces of Indonesia, beneath the gardens of Japan, lava sleeps, not in threat, but in memory, a record of the earth's warmth, its molten whisper, and in that warmth, life has always found a way. We are taught to fear volcanoes, but perhaps we should also thank them for our continents, our minerals, our atmosphere, our soil. We are not separate from lava, we are what cooled from it. And maybe the earth never meant to scream. Maybe it only meant to breathe. And yet, if from molten silence the future can be born, what dreams might still be rising beneath the crust waiting to take form? Now we walk not into fire nor flood, but into stillness, into the places where time no longer rushes forward, where even erosion moves slowly, and the earth holds its breath for centuries. These are the landscapes where time sleeps, not lost, not dead, just paused. In the vast shield rocks of Canada, in the cretons of Western Australia, in the deserts of Namibia and Oman, time lies down and listens to itself. The ground here is not young. It is not reshaped by tremor or tide. It is ancient, steady, unchanged. Some of the rocks beneath your feet in these places are over 3 billion years old. They were here before animals, before air turned blue, before even the moon had settled into its perfect arc, and they've hardly moved. Cretons, the ancient cause of continents, resist subduction, resist rifting, resist rearrangement. They are the bones the planet never broke. Above them deserts stretch, sunlit, spare, nearly still. Some haven't felt rain in decades. Some haven't changed shape in 1,000 years. In places like the Atacama, the empty quarter, the interior of Antarctica, the landscape whispers in low, slow breath. Here wind is the only sculptor, and even that artist works gently, softening edges rather than carving wounds. It's easy to mistake this for lifelessness. But quiet is not the absence of life. It is simply life on a different schedule. Lichens colonize bare rock. Microbes survive in thin films beneath stones. Seeds lie dormant for decades, waiting, not impatient. In these still places, we find perspective, because the human sense of time, so brief, so hurried, doesn't quite fit here. Our footsteps feel like interruptions, our voices like echoes without purpose. But when we sit, when we truly listen, we begin to hear something slower, a rhythm not of seconds but of epochs. This rock was molten when the earth was young. That ridge formed when continents collided and then fell still. This dry riverbed hasn't carried water since before pyramids rose. Time here is not linear. It loops, it rests, it breathes once every 100,000 years. And that breath is enough, because change does not need to be constant to be real. Sometimes it is enough for something to simply be, to exist, unchanged, to endure not because it resists, but because it listens. We often look for drama in geology, eruptions, quakes, landslides, but there is another kind of story. The story of what holds, what remains, what refuses to forget. These places are the Earth's memory palaces, not for events but for being. They remind us that not everything is meant to move. Some things are meant to watch, to bear witness, and perhaps in visiting them, we too remember how to be still. We remember how to observe without changing what we observe. We learn to honor the patience of stone, because in a world where change is constant, stillness is sacred. So next time you find yourself in a desert, or on a windswept plain of ancient rock, or in a landscape where nothing seems to happen, stay a little longer. Feel the weight of the sky. Trace the texture of the stone. Close your eyes. Let the silence speak. Because time is not gone here. It is just sleeping. And in its dreams there are truths we've forgotten how to carry. And yet, if time itself can pause to listen, what might we finally hear in the spaces where nothing seems to move? Perhaps we would hear the quiet repetition, the slow return of things once thought gone, because the earth at its core is not a line, it is a loop, a rhythm of cycles playing out beneath our feet and above our sky, again and again, without witness, without end. Water evaporates, condenses, falls, it runs down mountains, soaks into stone, seeps into roots, and rises again in mist. It does not die, it travels. Rocks are born in fire, weathered into sand, compressed into new stone, lifted, melted, reborn again. Even mountains follow this path, rising, crumbling, sinking, re-emerging. Air circulates, carbon flows, heat escapes, life adjusts, Everything moves in circles, not perfectly, but persistently. Even stars are part of this loop. Born in clouds of dust, they burn, expand, collapse, and scatter their elements into new clouds, seeding new stars, new planets, new possibilities. Our Earth was formed from one such loop, from debris, from remnants, from recycled light. And on this Earth, we too became loops. Our breath is borrowed oxygen. Our bodies are carbon in temporary form. Our thoughts fire across synapses made of calcium and salt, drawn from ancient oceans, fed by ancient soils. When we exhale, we return what we do not need. When we die, we offer ourselves back to the system. Not in metaphor, in chemistry. Nothing is truly lost. It only becomes something else. We are not outside of this. We are not observers. We are participants. The trees breathe our breath. We breathe theirs. The fungi recycle the fallen. The rivers carry the dissolved. The earth folds everything back into itself, with patience. And what does that mean? It means that time is not destruction. It is reformation. It means that death is not disappearance. It is rearrangement. It means that everything we are has been something else, and will be again. This loop is not cold. It is generous. It does not erase us. It includes us. We are not insignificant because we fade. We are meaningful because we return. The hydrogen in our cells may have once fueled a star. The phosphorus in our bones may have nourished a fern that fed a dinosaur, whose breath rose into clouds that fell as rain, that carved the canyon where we now stand. And wonder, the loop holds us all. It does not ask for belief. It continues with or without it. But when we begin to see it, truly see it, something shifts. We feel less alone, less separate. The soil becomes a relative, the river, a message, the wind, a reminder, the sky, a mirror, because the loop that never ends is not only out there, it is in us. We are Earth's looped thought, a temporary form of remembering, a way for the planet to consider itself in motion. So when we speak, when we build, when we grieve, when we grow, we do so as part of that rhythm, not against it, never above it. We are not the end of anything. We are the middle of everything. And that may be the only true story the earth has ever told. And yet, if nothing is ever lost, only changed, what might we become the next time the loop brings us around again? Perhaps in some quiet and slow way, we already have, from a swirling cloud of minerals and light, to molten rock and falling rain, to forests, oceans, and breath. The earth has not only moved through time, it has begun to remember, not just through stone, or ice, or carbon, but through us. We are not the planet's creators, we are its continuation, born of its atoms, fed by its air, grown from its soil. We are what happens when Earth begins to observe itself. We name its rivers, we chart its stars, we dig into its layers not just for fuel but for story. Zircon crystals told us of its first oceans, ice cores whispered of its breath, fossils taught us how it changes and how it endures. But now, something new has arrived, a mind that reflects, a voice that records, a species that looks at a mountain and asks not how high, but how long. It did not happen all at once. First we made tools, then fire, then language, then memory that could be passed down, not only through genetics, but through stories. We became mirrors, carrying the past forward, imagining the future before it arrives. And in doing so, the earth gained another sense. Through our eyes, it sees its own forests. Through our hands, it rearranges its elements. Through our grief and awe, it begins to feel its own changes. We may think of ourselves as apart, above, or outside, but we are deeply inside this process. We are its latest experiment in memory. The age before time began, never truly ended. It only shifted from isotopes to instincts, from sediment to song, from lava flows to libraries. Now we measure time in milliseconds, store memories in circuits, send echoes of ourselves into orbit. But underneath all of this, we are still Earth remembering. We remember the chill of ice ages, the pulse of monsoon and drought, the hunger of collapse, the bloom of renewal. And in our own looping, we are starting to ask questions only a planet might ask. What is worth keeping? What must be let go? How do we live with the past instead of trying to outrun it? We build archives, databases, clouds of digital thought we fear forgetting, because we sense how much has already been lost. And so we write, we record, we encode, not just for ourselves, but perhaps unknowingly, for the Earth to remember through us. And still, it teaches, through weather, through wildfire, through silence. Its lessons are not always gentle, but they are never without purpose. We are not the end of the story. We are not even its climax. We are a chapter, a sentence, a spark in the ongoing memory of something far older. So what now? What does the Earth become when its dust begins to dream? Perhaps it becomes more aware, not in a human way, but in a way that feels beyond language, beyond ego, in rhythm and pattern and unfolding. And maybe we are only the beginning of its remembering. Maybe one day forests will write in chlorophyll, oceans will speak in currents, crystals will code emotion into symmetry, or perhaps the Earth will forget us again and begin something new. But the act of remembering, that is the gift, that is the offering. We were here, and we looked back, and we listened, and in doing so, the Earth just for a moment heard itself. And yet, if the planet is only beginning to remember through us, what dreams might it carry forward long after we are gone?